Med school has taught me how to be okay with complete failure. If I knew I was going to be saying this before med school, I might have thought that it meant that I was struggling to keep up with the intense coursework. But no, that's not it. Though it would probably be less embarrassing if that was the issue. I mean failing to have basic social skills that I thought I had in my regular life, but somehow goes to shit when I talk to patients as a medical student. One incident from our clinical skills course comes to mind. It's Wednesday, and time for clinical sites once again. Today, I'm in the hospital, interviewing a man who has malaria. Our interaction already starts off on a bad foot for two reasons. Firstly, the poor guy hasn't even been given a room and has just spent the whole night in a narrow hallway, which really sucks for him, but also sucks for me, because people keep sliding past us throughout our interview. Secondly, this man has just gotten his appetite back after weeks of not being able to eat much, and just as he's about to take his first bite of pasta, literally, fork full of food, inches from his mouth, I walk in with the resident, who asks if he'll take a little bit of time, yeah right, to talk to one of the medical students about why he's in the hospital. He puts his food down, suppresses his hunger, which would later become hanger. Like hangry. And proceeds to talk to me. Our interview starts out fine. I ask him about his recent trip, tell him how I also had malaria twice, and we bond over that. I'm also talking to this older gentleman who's sitting next to him, who I assume is his father. All good so far. But then we get to the family history. So now I'm going to ask you a couple questions about your family's health. How's your father doing? I motion to the man sitting next to him. He's dead. This is my godfather. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I awkwardly fumble through a few questions about how he passed away and quickly move on to his mother. So how's your mom's health? She wasn't doing too great, to be honest. Wasn't doing too great. I think to myself, past tense. My brain hears that and thinks, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth again. Maybe she's also passed away. Has she also passed away? No. She's sitting right there. And he points to a woman sitting in a chair at the end of the hallway, within earshot. I only said she wasn't doing too great because she has schizophrenia, and she hasn't been taking her meds. Okay, I think to myself, now what? We're in brain and behavior. I know something about schizophrenia. Do I ask more about it? If so, do I ask the patient or his mother, who's literally sitting a few feet away, listening to our whole conversation? I awkwardly fumble through a few questions about his mother's health, alternating between the patient and his mother, who are telling me completely different things. At one point, I get caught in a drawn-out conversation with his mother, who's telling me about all these diseases she has that the doctors don't believe her about. I don't know how to exit the situation without being rude. Finally, I'm able to get back to the patient. Okay, let's move on. Do you have any siblings? Yeah, an older brother. Okay, and how's his health? I don't know. I think he's fine. Oh, does he live far away? No, he's in prison. Fuck! What do you say when someone tells you that their brother's in prison? God, I don't want to be awkward about every single family member. At first, I want to say, I'm sorry to hear that, but then I stop myself. What if he wasn't sorry? Should I be making that assumption? I mean, assumptions haven't really worked out for me this far. So what would I say instead? Is it better to say something awkward or not say anything at all? I decided it's better to not risk it and not say anything at all. I see the patient and his godfather exchange a glance. Fuck! Did this whole internal conflict come off as me judging him for having a brother in prison? God, I don't even know anymore. I just want to get through this and let this man eat his lunch. I move along briskly and almost make it to the end of the social history. Almost done with this nightmare ASM clinical site. And brilliant me, I've saved the best for last. The sexual history. I know I'm not alone in this, but I dreaded taking the sexual history. This was one of our first clinical sites, and one of the first times I was going to ask the sexual history of a real, non-actor human. While I was asking him about diet and exercise, I was preparing myself in my mind. Okay, don't forget to ask how often they use protection. Don't forget to ask about STIs, but don't say STIs. Say sexually transmitted illnesses. Don't forget about HIV. Meanwhile, the patient is telling me how he plays a lot of basketball, might even play professionally someday. I wanted to say, wow, sounds like you're really physically active. But in my mind, I was preparing myself to ask about the sexual history. So what came out instead was, wow, sounds like you're really sexually active. If it was possible to die of embarrassment, I would have dropped dead, right then and there. Unfortunately, I lived. And still had to ask about the sexual history. In front of his godfather and his mother. You can imagine for yourself how that went. So yeah, I'd say that was one of the worst failures to have basic social skills in my life. I was honestly pretty devastated after that encounter. I felt like a huge burden to the patient, and I wondered how many more times I would make a patient feel deeply uncomfortable. How many more times I would make a complete fool out of myself. At first, I wanted to just bottle it up inside of me, figure it out myself, and never let anyone know that I could be this incompetent. But luckily, I spoke to my amazing classmates and friends who didn't shame me or tell me to drop out of med school like I'd feared, but instead helped me come up with ways to avoid the same embarrassing scenarios from happening again. By the end of it, I was able to laugh at myself. It was a painful way to learn, but it definitely did the trick. And so, in case it helps anyone here, here's what I learned. 1, start the family history by asking if both parents are still alive. That way you never get caught off guard. 2, when someone tells you something that you weren't expecting, for example, my brother is in prison, you can always say, thank you for sharing that with me. 3, never make assumptions. To assume is to make an ass of you and me. 4, when you fail, you don't have to hide it. Asking for help takes a lot of courage. It might make you feel weak or vulnerable. It might make you feel lesser than your peers. But in my experience, here at Sinai, we are surrounded by incredibly compassionate people. Our professors, the administration, our classmates. If you ask for help, you will only be better for it.